live on Oz Property Investor. We bring the big names and we have the big fun for the first time in 2023. We are back. How you going, Joe? How you going, Alex? What's happening?
Fabulous.
Just still at work, obviously. So, I'm great.
I love Joe's. Like, I'm like, yeah, and then Joe's like, fabulous. Yeah. Good. How's it feel first week back in the office, Alex? What's happening?
Yeah, it's just a bit crazy. I suppose like going over that Christmas break, everyone's sitting around thinking about all the development they're going to do and the extensions they're going to do. And they've been looking at sites and been on holidays up at Noosa or wherever and saw a for sale sign and they're just bubbling away. So come as soon as everyone's back, which pretty much all the planners in Queensland anyway came back on the 9th, just the phone did not stop and the emails are just full of I want to buy this property. I need to make an offer by close of business today. And then I look at the date and it was, the 1st of January. I'm like, well, sorry. So
it's a time to be alive.
Yeah. So that's what my life has been the past, 2 or 3 days, but can't complain. It's a good place to be.
Wow. It's exciting. Yeah. It's
good. Jeff, mate, how are you?
Yeah, good. Just I'm not back till next week, so I'm taking it relatively easy, just relaxing, but also being very busy in the background. So exciting times. Good to sort of see some properties and be back on the live sessions. It feels like forever, Joe. Mate,
I know. The break is over. It is now time to get our real estate game back on, and yeah, I'm excited for what this year has to hold for us as well, because we've got some pretty interesting industry experts. Alex is obviously one of them right now, but these guys are going to share all their wisdom, all their knowledge. So I am pumped to kick off our first interview of 2023. And
how are you anyway, Joe? I want to, you feeling good? You good, mate?
I'm fantastic. I had COVID for the first time over Christmas, and COVID is really not good for you. It is literally the sickest I've been in my adult life. Once I got over that, though, I had a great Christmas break. There were a couple of really nice property deals that popped up over that period, because if someone's listing their property over Christmas, there's probably a reason they want to get rid of it. So there are some good deals, but there's not too much stock being listed at the moment. We won't see too much stock getting listed until the end of Australia Day is typically when we see it coming back on. So we still, if you see a cracking property, maybe have a chat with the agent and try and get something rocking and rolling with it. So
I tell you what else is rocking and rolling. Unfortunately, inflation in November, 7.3%. Mate, it's not going down. Damn it! Stop buying your coffees. I mean, I bought a coffee. Was out at a cafe today, so yeah. What's going on
yourself, there? Jeff. Treat yourself. Well, what are we talking about today, Jeff?
We are talking about town planning with the town planning extraordinaire. So I didn't anticipate how much interest there was. There's a lot of comments, very about commenting about his facial hair. But we're going to be talking about what Town Planning 101 is. We're going to be talking about the housing affordability sort of crisis and Alex's sort of view on that, but also the things he considers when buying a profitable development sites, and sort of talk to some things on that. And he has some real goodies on that. So it's going to be a jam-packed session. So drop us a comment, drop us a like, do all that good stuff you're watching later on YouTube as well, because we love that. So, there's going to be heaps of knowledge and wisdom from all three of us. I'm sure plenty from Alex and Joe, and I'll even tag along for the ride as well. So did I sum it up well, Joe? What did I miss?
Mate, you summed it up perfectly, but I think the crucial thing is, for a property investor, anyone that's looking to grow a portfolio, you need to understand the ins and outs of town planning. Maybe not as much as Alex knows, but you do have to understand how the heck all of this stuff works, because that's how you're going to leverage your portfolio, not just with debt, but also with knowledge, because property is one of these environments that is, what do we call it? It hasn't got as much information. Share market, there's a lot of information. Everyone has
market, you'd say.
Yes, efficient and inefficient. It's a very inefficient market. There's not as much information. So if you can use some of this town planning knowledge to your experience, put it in your little belt, you can make hundreds of thousands of dollars by one little purchase. Instead of buying the one on this side of the street, buy the one on the other side of the street. And I'm sure Alex is going to tell us all about it. But before we introduce the man that is Alex Steffan, we're going to jump into one of our sponsored posts, and then we are going to introduce the man, the myth,
Do the quote of the week show? We missed the quote of the week.
Oh, well, I feel like we'll do that then. Okay. Yeah, sure.
Sorry, I thought geez, go away for a couple
Quote
of
of the week. What's your quote, Jeff?
You want to go first?
Who, me?
Yep.
You can tell we've had 3 weeks off.
Is this the kind of bloody show you guys are running here? I didn't sign up for this. No. All right. I've got my quote is Socrates, famous philosopher who obviously knows a lot about a lot of things. And his quote is, "By far the greatest and most admirable form of wisdom is that needed to plan and beautify cities and human communities." So what I'm hearing from that is the most admirable form of wisdom is found with the town planners. I think that's pretty apt for tonight's conversation, I think.
Yeah, I didn't think he was a town planner. I thought he was a philosopher.
Exactly. So he knows a lot about everything, and he's pushed all of that admiration towards us.
How good is he?
There we go.
Socrates.
And this is the thing. You don't even think about town planning. And actually, this is why we wanted to bring you on. You have an awesome little TikTok that just explains town planning very simply. And there's so much involved with town planning. Every single aspect of human function is because of town planners. It's been thought out. Every single aspect has been thought out, planned, constructed, and developed. And then you've got to factor in growth and all of that crazy stuff. And some of it gets boring, but some of it is very interesting as well. That's what I'm.
Yeah. I always like to explain that, like, if someone's like, "Oh, I've never heard of town planning," it's like, well, if you go way back to like caveman era or cavewoman era, like even then there was someone who was in that village going like, "Hey guys, how about we don't like poo right next to where we cook our dinner? Like, why don't we poo over there? Because there's like a gully that goes down that way." Like that is a form of like, there was someone town planning then. So like town planning is forever old, but really only really came
as
into
old as the hills, as they say. So good time.
Yeah, only really got its name and recently, really. And even now, half the people still have no idea that there's all these people in the background like planning the towns and making sure that everyone has a nice quality of life. So yeah.
Was it the Romans that kind of coined it and started it, or before then? I don't know.
I finished uni 20 years ago. 20 oh no, yeah, almost 20 years ago. So yeah, you're talking to the wrong guy if you want to know the history of town planning.
Skip that session. Jeff, what about you, mate? What is your quote of the week?
I went a little more closer to our era, and Winston Churchill. Planning is worthless, but planning is everything. So it's a very philosophical statement. Like you have to think about that. Like you're saying planning is nothing, but it's everything. Like I don't know. It's very. I had to think about it a little bit, but I suppose what he's saying is, you like doing it, planning without actually doing it is not as useful. But you need to do that planning before you actually do it. Is what I would say. That's the way I interpret that. So dropping some wisdom on you already there, Joe. How do you like that one?
There you go. I felt wisdomized in that session there.
How about you, Joe?
Mine's very basic. A goal without a plan is just a wish, and. You've got to create a plan. You've got to get there. You've got to plan and structure it. You need to have a system in place to be able to achieve the goal. If you just have the goal without a system. Okay. Are we ready? Let's jump into this session. Let's jump into it. Let's make it happen.
I'm ready to do it. Go, Joe.
This live session is sponsored by Scott Agate from Hello House. Scott has created the world's first property negotiation as a service business. So what does that mean? Well, let's think about it. When was the last time you negotiated on anything over $100, let alone a property that is going to be one of the biggest investments of your life? The vendor, they have a trained negotiator on their side in the form of a real estate agent. That's kind of like you stepping into the ring with Mike Tyson after never training a day of boxing in your life. These guys are trained professionals, and that's what they do day in and day out. And this is what Hello House does every single day as well. They negotiate on property to get the best buy price from the real estate agents. Scott Agate, he's the expert negotiator. He has been in this industry since 1995. He owned and operated 3 Bell franchises. Scott was the guy that was teaching these real estate agents all these agent games. He knows all of their tricks. Having him on your side is going to give you a massive unfair advantage and literally save you tens of thousands of dollars. Unlike other ways of purchasing property, Scott's incentives are aligned with you, the buyer, meaning the more money he saves you, the more money he makes, which is what you want. You need to have those incentives aligned. Scott has kindly offered our group a massive discount on the retainer fee for his service. So if you're looking to buy your next home or investment property, click the link below to get in touch.
Here we go, Joe. Oh, you got to go to this one. There you go. I made it. So people are asking where the link is. So if you can see this session, please let us know, people, because that's a surprise. So people are messaging me saying where are things. But no, interestingly, before. Sorry, go, Joe.
This live session.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's people messaging me. They're anxious. They're missing out on the value. But interestingly, before I get into introducing Alex, and you have a long bio, so I hope I'll try and smash through that as well. But somebody's already asked in the group about subdividing in Toowoomba, and there's somebody who asked in the group today. I saw you commented about easements as well, which it shows that how integral to a lot of property investing town planning is. So I think if people have questions about general sort of town planning stuff, drop it in, because this guy has absolute wealth of knowledge. Created prop teas. So let's get into a bit of an intro, shall we? So 15 years, Alex, it's 15 plus years town planning. You are the young alumni from Griffith University 2017, Queensland Young Achiever of the Year. Gee, man, that's amazing. You're a nominee. Prop Teas, the world's first automated town planning machine. Mate, how do you even, I wouldn't even know how to do that. But interestingly as well, life outside of your town planning business, you love drones, bike packing. Is that bike packing or backpacking?
Yeah, says bike packing.
What is bike packing?
Bike packing, basically the same as backpacking, but with your bicycle. So,
you pack it in your back and literally carry it around it, yeah?
No. You just take your bike and you land in the country, pack, put pannier bags on or strap stuff to your bike, and off you go for a couple of weeks.
That's why it was bike packing cycling. There you go, adventuring and hanging out with your wife and your daughter. But interestingly as well, you've created an NFT. What is it? NFT bikes or crypto bikes?
Yeah.
We could go down
I'm busy.
That we want.
Yeah, that's like a whole podcast in itself, I think. But yeah, I'm a busy.
You do a lot. When do you get time to sleep?
I think I'm just like a really efficient person. So like everything that I do, I try to find the efficiency in it. So, for example, our planning firm, there's 7 of us, but we do the same amount of work that about similar firms that are like 20 or 30 people. We do the same work with 7 people. And it's because we automate and we systemize and we, spend time on the tasks that actually require our input as professional consultants versus just like, having meetings for the sake of meetings and going to site when we don't really need to go to site and wasting time. So yeah, just efficiency, automation, and streamlining. So I actually I don't work weekends. I don't work after 5 o'clock unless it's like doing something fun like this. So yeah, I sleep pretty well.
What are some of the efficiency hacks that we can all take advantage of in our little lives to make us a little bit more efficient? Because I feel like not all of us are as efficient as you, mate. I definitely aspire to be a lot more efficient because I find myself working on the weekends and after hours. So how do I become more efficient?
I just have like one simple thing that everyone should be using, and for some reason no one is using. And most people use like Office 365 or Outlook these days. There's a thing called Quick Parts. I don't know if you guys have used Quick Parts. Oh, mate.
Nope.
Look it up now.
So Quick Parts are like the number one thing that I tell everyone. So I have a whole separate business that does this kind of thing. But Quick Parts, so basically if you Google what a Quick Part is, it's basically you can write an email or in a Word document. And if you're constantly writing the same thing, you can save it as a Quick Part. So like if you're constantly saying like, thanks for contacting me, like, I've had a quick look at your property and I think, blah, blah, blah. Then you save it as a Quick Part and all you need to do is type in like THAN, enter, and it'll generate the rest of the email. So if you do that, so I have a quick part for absolutely everything. Like you can almost not ask me a question via email that I'm not automatically responding to you.
Is
But
that just
it's
a
not like,
template, though?
well, it's like a template, but it's like naturally flowing. So you don't have to go anywhere. You just keep typing, press enter, keep typing, press enter, and you can write a 4-page email in like 10 seconds. So
That's exciting.
everyone should be doing that. And I don't like it in business, like don't be doing that to your friends, but I am not free this weekend. Quick part. Hey.
It's called LOL equals I'm not free this weekend.
You could save a quick part that every time you write LOL, it turns it into laughing out loud. You know, that's efficiency right there.
That is efficiency
nice.
right there.
All right, so let's, mate. There's going to be so much wisdom. Sorry, Jeff.
Yeah, let's talk about property.
Yeah. I was just it's like you read my mind. So we love asking investors about their first property investment. So could you give us a run through? Like, how did it all go?
Yeah, so my first property, I was basically renting in a share house, as we all were, and then found a unit in the suburb that I loved in Fairfield in Queensland, like in Brisbane. Yep. And yeah, bought and figured out that the cost of my rental repayments, if I moved in with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, then it would be cheaper to do that, and I'd be buying and renting, paying off the mortgage versus giving rent money to someone. So it made natural sense to me. So that's how I ended up buying somewhere. It went horribly though. So it's just like, so it was still being complete. So sorry, I should say it was not titled yet. So it was still, it was completed.
Brand new,
it was sitting there. Yeah. And it was right when like all of the incentives got introduced. So like, I didn't really know what I was doing. So really all the prices were inflated by 20 grand or whatever the amount was at the time. And it wasn't titled, and knowing what I know now in doing, because we do titling in our office, is they were like, it'll be done before Christmas. And then like we moved in like March and just sat there empty for like 3 months while we were just waiting and waiting. So that was a huge pain, but can't complain. I mean, to be honest, I bought it like 10 years ago and it's still probably only worth what I paid for it. But that's how it goes when you don't use smart people like yourselves and you don't join in communities like this, which didn't exist at the time. So that's how I ended up with my first buy.
Wow. Was that like an off the plan unit or townhouse?
Yeah, just a small one better. Yeah. Well, funnily enough, it was actually a studio. And then once I bought it, being a town planner, I was like, why do they have like the balconies the size of the whole unit? I'm going to use my expertise as a planner to enclose the unit. And then I thought, well, no one in the body corporate's going to want me to do this, or I could maybe do it for free and convince everyone else in the unit complex to get that amended in the approval. So then I actually convinced everyone to chuck in like $200, which paid for me to do it, which I was going to do it anyway. And then I enclosed I got approval to enclose all the balcony, and then actually did the work for mine, turned it into like a 1-bedroom apartment versus a studio, turned the kitchenette into a full kitchen. And then, so that's got valued at, 100 grand more, but not that,
over 10
not that I'll ever sell it, but happy days. And that's the perfect example of using town planning to your advantage.
That's interesting. Remember we had that chat with Amanda Farmer last year, Joe, probably around February, similar time. And she sort of spoke about similar things, about those sort of looking at what you can do with the sort of strata and sort of upgrading. So interesting, yeah. And the other thing I'd like to pick up on there is, you said you'd probably never sell it. Was that, or you just sort of, what's the reason you wouldn't consider selling it if you don't feel it was a good investment?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I also bought it because of the location. So it's like towards, if you know Brisbane, it's towards kind of the Dutton Park side of Fairfield. So it's like a kilometre's walk from UQ over the bridge. It's 300 meters from the new train station for the Cross-River Rail. Like it's just in a great spot. And I'm like, either way, I'll just buy this. Worst case, it'll sell it, like pay itself off, and then I'll have a studio apartment like 2 kilometers from the city. So, if I ever have kids who want to go to UQ, then they can just live there, or, that's kind of the plan. Funnily enough, I actually bought a house like 100 meters down the street too, a couple of years later. So it seems like I like Fairfield.
So how did that first purchase kind of shape your investing going forward? Like, did it help or hinder? Because I guess you wouldn't have learnt those lessons initially, or I don't know. What did it kind of do to you?
It taught me the importance of just signing things. I know that sounds like really bad to say, but like I deal with paperwork all day, every day, and the level of paperwork to buy a property, like with everything that goes along with it, with mortgages and whatnot, is like tenfold of what I deal with. So, there was a lot of instances where I was like, oh, I forgot, someone's like, oh, I'm like, where's the mortgage? Why hasn't it been released yet? Blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, you haven't signed the thing. I'm like, man, I've signed like 40 things this week. Like, what are you talking about? And then sure enough, there was one that I missed. Oh, sorry, we got the cleaner
here. we are live. This is not pre-recorded, folks. Good.
Yeah. So the so that was a big lesson. And I took that through to my other purchases where like later on I got people that I trusted, people that I knew, and just kind of, obviously read everything and made sure everything was aligned with what I was, signing up for. But, signing things quickly and just making sure that everything's progressing forward as quickly as it possibly can.
Yeah, I think that's actually crucially important, having your team, because what happens is people think that their team is there and doing the things that they should be doing as fast as you want them to be done. But I think it's crucially important to say, okay, Mr. Mortgage Broker, where are you at with the finance side of things? Okay, what do you need from me? What are the next steps? What is it going to look like? What's going to stand in the way? What is standing in the way? What are the potentials for standing in the way? And then go into the conveyancer, ducking down like it's...
You should turn your camera.
And it's the same with the conveyancer. It's the exact same with the conveyancer. Like, you just have to follow these people up and chase and what's going on with the deal. And hopefully if you have someone helping you with that, like a buyer's agent or professional, then hopefully they're doing that for you. But absolutely crucial to actually get a deal moving forward, because the squeakiest wheel, gets the grease. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah.
Now we've lost Alex.
No, I'm still here.
Oh,
yeah.
He's still here. Anyway, okay. Well, let's start talking about town planning 101, why we should care, common mistakes. I gave a bit of an overview of why I care about town planning and my thoughts, but it would be good to understand what are some of the reasons why property investors should care about town planning. Why is town planning important for investors?
Yeah, I mean, as we kind of alluded to earlier, like town planning completely shapes our existence. Like if you're completely unaware that town planning exists, like you're really not giving yourself justice in what you're doing, especially if you're into property development and property investing, because one small line on a digital image on a website on the back end of the council, website could completely change the value of a property, and you have absolutely no idea that exists unless you're somewhat familiar with the town planning scheme. So town planning 101, trying to like give people like really quick and easy information. The things that you need to be across are zoning. If you don't understand what a zone is and what they mean and how to research it, that's the number one crucial thing that you need to do. And I usually do these presentations where I like show pictures of like really crappy old houses, like in beaten down suburbs. And I'm like, what do you think about this property? And they're like, oh, it's crap. How much did you pay for it? It's in the back streets of Camira or something, like out in Ipswich. Like, I don't know, like 250 grand. I'm like, okay, well, actually, this property's 400 meters away from the new train station that they're putting in. And it's actually being proposed to be rezoned to high density residential in the amendment to the scheme that's coming in 2 years' time. So that property is actually, as much as a beaten down house, if you knew what's going on with the planning scheme and the amendments and all the future planned works, it's actually a cracker of a site. And like at least 80% of the people have no idea. So by just familiarizing yourself with town planning, what it means, how it can impact a property, what's happening in that specific area, then that's where you can really start taking advantage of it. And using it, making money from it, really.
And does that go as far or as specific to considering things like your frontage, like your minimum lot sizes? Do you sort of you'd go that macro in town planning, I imagine?
Yeah, 100%. Like how close you can build to the boundary, what frontage you need to develop, what the density you're allowed, how much private open space you need. Like
Yep.
there is like the planning scheme in Brisbane's 7,500 pages long. It's a long document. Anything you think of that you're like, there's no way that is in there. Like it's in there. Like there's like the minimum dimensions you need for a bin to be collected. And like, this is the stuff that we know. It's like, it's like 0.18 by 0.18. That's how much area you need to have a bin to be collected. So then you need that amount of frontage for the bins to be there to be collected, whilst also having room for your green boy, like your electrical stuff and your water meters. So then it's like your whole development could fall over because you don't have enough space to pick up your bins. Like, and weirdly, that's a town planning issue. So yeah, there's obviously you can go like super macro, but as if you're not a town planner and you're not trying to do this professionally, what you need to understand is zones, overlays, and location of infrastructure. If you can understand those things, then you're pretty much on the right track. One thing that can make that very difficult is depending on where you are, every council has a completely different set of zones and overlays and locations to find that infrastructure. So it can be a bit daunting. I always say to our clients or to anyone looking to become a property developer or get stuff with uplift in it, I say just concentrate on an area or two areas. So like you might concentrate on Brisbane and Logan. Understand that like there's not like absolutely everything there is to know about those areas. And then that's where you'll just pick up those cracking deals because you can make those executive decisions based on the planning scheme policies versus the other person who has to call their planner. They'll get back to them 2 days later or a week later, depending on who they're using. And then it's too late. You've already, someone else has already got it. So sorry,
can I go a little off topic here? I want to ask some questions about some things you mentioned. So the town planning, what are your thoughts on having the Brisbane City Council as like, does that make your life easier, or is it? I imagine it would, or it doesn't. What are your thoughts on that?
So from a town planning point of view, as much as it's one big council region, every single pocket probably has its own neighborhood plan. So from a planning scheme, there's this overarching zone, but every single neighborhood kind of has its own set of rules and regulations anyway. So we're probably, the advantage for us is that we're constantly dealing with the same people. So we do a lot of work in Brisbane. Our office is in Brisbane. So it's, good because there's only a handful of planners in council. So we deal with the same people every day. But in terms of how big the council is, I think it's the biggest council in the Southern Hemisphere. It's massive. The budget was $3 billion or something. It's just ludicrous.
So the planning rules could be completely different. So, a suburb like Bracken Ridge, which is on the outskirts of the Brisbane Council, and then an inner city suburb could be completely different. And you don't even think about it because you've got to then go to that next level. You can't just say, oh, it's a minimum lot size of 600 square meters and needs a frontage of 18. I can do it. No, you need to go deeper.
Yeah, and that's funnily enough, a really good example of an area that planning is very specific. So that whole Bracken Ridge, Brisbane Downs area there's a proposed amendment to the neighborhood plan, which is changing all of these emerging community zones to environmental protection. So there's all these development sites there that on paper look really good. And halfway through this year, to be honest, council dropped these things overnight. So it could be any time between now and halfway through this year, that could completely change. And those provisions out there are completely different to the ones that are going to be in Fairfield or anywhere around here. So that's very, very, two very good examples.
But then from an investing standpoint, it actually might not be a bad purchase to be buying in Bracken Ridge because it's not going to get overdeveloped and houses are going to be, there's not going to be a massive, not in my backyard, that whole NIMBY thing. People actually can't develop there. So if you do want a really nice big house on a big block, that's where people are going to go, because as communities get built out with more cities, people don't like that. They'll start to go to other neighborhoods like that.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely gives opportunities to secure some nice big parcels of land. But the problem is you're going to have to wait till the people the property developers coming in who don't know about the planning scheme, buying up all these properties thinking they can do all this amazing stuff and then getting stuck with, a couple of acres that they thought they were going to develop. So then once that crashes, then you go in, send Joe in and we'll buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll time it. We'll time it perfectly. What are some of the common mistakes? Because you must see so many property investors coming to you, like mum and dad investors that have half a clue but no idea at the same time. Like, what are some of the common mistakes you see with everyday investors out there?
Yeah, I won't harp on about zoning, but obviously making sure that like whatever you're intending to do with the property is the zone aligns with that. So if you're buying a vacant block of land because you're like, I love this land, it's near the creek, I'm going to build my dream house on it, and it's completely covered in a flood overlay, like you're not going to build a dream house on it. So like make sure that the zone and the overlays are suited to what you're trying to do. The other one is, and this is more development sites, is lawful points of discharge for stormwater. So here in Queensland, and I would imagine around the country, there's some level of, like we have QDM, which is the Queensland Urban Drainage Manual, and the other forms of policy and legislation around stormwater drainage. But that is the number one thing that will completely kill your deal. Like if the site is sloping towards the back by pretty much more than a meter, it is not cost effective to fill to the front, and you need to get a pipe through the neighboring property at the rear. All it takes is that owner to say, no, I don't want your pipe, and then you can't do your development anymore. So it can, and it will literally play out like that. Like there are,
I wouldn't want anyone's pipe. Why? What is your pipe going to do for me?
Yeah, well, this is what's kind of interesting.
Provocative question.
Like we've seen. Yeah, like there's different motives and different reasons why people will allow like a pipe like that to go through your property. So like the argument from our point of view is, well, look, you've currently got all of the water from this 800 square meter site going straight through your property, like over the land. So it's going, and once we do our development, it's going to be worse. So if you let us build this pipe, then it's going to go under your land. There's no easements on it. We'll fix your garden. We'll do the fence for you. Like, everyone's happy. So that's our argument for it. But some people are like, I will not let you build that pipe under any circumstances whatsoever. And they do not care and they do not want to know about it. Some people want like a Coles gift voucher for $500. Some people want $100,000. And like, depending on the circumstances, like any of those things are possible. And we've had this one job where I asked the client what he had to go through 2 properties. One was some movie tickets and the other one he paid $60,000 for. Same pipe going through the same amount of land. And I was just like, oh my God, I hope these like neighbors don't talk and one figured out that the other got like movie tickets and the other one got like $60,000, because that would be heartbreaking.
Brutal.
But but for the developer, he was like, paying $60,000, it still works for me. So like, let's just get on with it.
Cost of doing business somewhat.
You'd really hate Avatar after that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
On the I wanted to go back and we're talking 101. So somebody's asked, and this is Tammy. She asked a great question. What do you mean by overlay in comparison to zoning? Is that
Oh, good question.
Well, not well, I suppose maybe I might have just mixed my words, but overlays and zoning. So in planning, you've most planning legislation set up in a couple of layers. So you've got kind of your zone layer that allows you to do certain things. Above that, you've got neighborhood or local plans. So like the zone might say, it's a low density zone, we want houses. But then the more kind of macro neighborhood plan might say, yeah, we want houses, but we want them to be 1 story high. And because this area is blah, blah, blah. Then there might be an overlay that sits over it, over everything, that might completely change that says, actually, you know what, this overlay says you can build 6 stories. So you kind of got to understand, the interaction between
like
those things. Yeah, it's like a hierarchy. So, and then just making sure that, you understand what each of them mean. So zones are generally like broad land use specific. So they're like, pretty airy, to be honest. They're like, we want like suburban character with general normal patterns of development in this area. So that's like what a zone will say. Whereas an overlay might say, this area is affected by flooding and you're not allowed to build a house there. So you got to kind of make sure you're looking at all of those different things.
And since
And
we're
it was
talking
already
one-on-one, though, should we talk about things like easements and covenants and all that sort of good stuff and crossovers as well? Because I think there'll be some people that'll be like, there's some terms getting thrown out here. Yeah, somebody said
Covenant.
covenants. Yeah. So do you want to quickly define probably, I think there's covenants, easements, and
Yeah, don't fail us. There's a question. There's a statement here. Alex knows his stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you, Facebook user.
I can tell you who it was. But you want to define those couple of terms.
Let's do it. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's cover them off.
Geez, you want me to?
Yeah.
What's an easement? What is an easement? Because actually, one point that you just said there, actually, that stood out to me was this guy's going to get a pipe that is stormwater or drinking water through his house, but it's not going to cause an easement. What? He's got a massive pipe that needs access, so it should be an easement. So how does that work? Maybe
Joe,
that's too deep.
Joe, did you not read the infrastructure design planning scheme policy? It's on page 84. Yeah, so easements are encumbrances on your property that may have some requirement, something on your property that needs to benefit someone else. So a typical easement would be like a drainage easement, like a sewer line running through your property, or an access easement to allow access from other people to your property. So if you live if there's someone living behind you on a battle axe or hatchet style lot, then they might have an access easement over your property. So that allows them to have free right of passage through your property. Whether or not some kind of asset needs an easement really comes down to the local planning scheme policy or the whatever the infrastructure policies are. So for example, in Brisbane, certain pipe widths don't require easements. So you could imagine like a 150 mil stormwater pipe is, a pretty small pipe. So if that breaks, then council have to fix it. They'll just walk in there with a shovel, dig it out, fix it, like happy days. Whereas if it's a 225 pipe or a 300 mil pipe, then now you're talking like a proper pipe that it's a heavy pipe. It's probably deeper. You're going to have an excavator come through. So that's where then council will have a condition or something in the planning scheme policy that makes you put an easement over that area. A lot of them are like, some of those things are, you can negotiate those, but yeah, I wouldn't want to.
Well, actually,
I can see you both smirking. What's going on? Oh, that's good.
Sorry for the inappropriate joke.
Very childish. We're not even going to repeat it for the podcast, so you're going to have to watch us on YouTube if you want to know what that said. But the question that I had, now that I've kind of lost it, was just what you said there. Is there's a little flexibility in that. How flexible is council, and should we be thinking like that? Hey, this property doesn't really tick the box, but it's only one thing. Council's going to love me. They're going to be fine. So let's just go for it. Do this development. I'll buy the place. We'll make it happen. But you guys sort it out. Is that a real world we should be thinking in, or as soon as we find one of these issues, should we just done, move on?
Yeah, really good question. It highly depends on what that issue is. Like if it's because like there's one small tree that needs to be removed and there's 400 trees, you need to get rid of one of them, like sure, like a reasonable outcome would be getting rid of that tree. But if it's something like stormwater discharge, like I don't know any council that will negotiate on that. Like that, it's just a hard no. So unless like there are outcomes that we put forward, but I guarantee it's hurting our clients' pockets, and whether or not then the project is feasible, I'm not sure. But we can get you an outcome, whether it's worthwhile is another thing. So yeah, like my advice is always like, really, you want to find a clean site, but ultimately, if you're up to have a fight, spend a bit of money and waste a bit of time, then I say that if you think something is reasonable and like legitimately reasonable, not just like, oh yeah, it'd be great if we had 10 stories here. Like if it's like a legitimately reasonable thing, most of the time we can get it approved. And it's not like, tick and flick, like we get it in. It's like, it takes a lot of time. We might have to get it refused, go to court, appeal it. But like if you're in front of a judge and you're like, we want to build this 4-story building because everywhere around it is 4 stories, but the code says it's only allowed to be 2 stories. So council refused it on the basis that it conflicts with the code. You get in front of a judge and go, well, the rest of the street's 4 stories, so we should be able to be 4 stories. Like 99% of the time, you're good. So it's just about picking your battles. How long do you want to be stuck down in a deal for? Think about what you could do with that money if you weren't stuck with this one project. So really you want to find something that's like nice, clean, easy, get in, get out, get on to the next one. You could do 5 deals in the time that you do one. So
it kind of sounds like an if this then that sort of approach. Like if this were to happen, if we were to go to a court or a tribunal, what's the likelihood of it getting approved, and if it doesn't get approved, what's the outcome? It's kind of interesting. Before we get on to probably the next holding costs, that's it.
Yeah, holding costs are going to be the killer on that, because if you're buying a site thinking you're going to do a rooming house and expecting all this long tail cash flow, but you're holding this massive house that's got very minimal cash flow, you've got interest eating away at you while you go through that. It's an interesting one. Sorry, mate. Go on.
I've got this used to be a thing maybe 10, 15 years ago in Brisbane, and you may not know the answer to this, but you may, given you do a lot. So the easy 2-into-1 splitters in Brisbane, how tough are they to find these days?
Yeah, really, really hard. Yeah. And if they are there, then everyone, like the person who owns it knows, and they're like, and the people who want to buy it know. So there's like 40 people trying to buy it, and like the owner just is like, who's going to pay the most? So, but yeah, no, you're right. Like 10, 15 years ago, it was just like every third call was like, hey, I want to subdivide this. It looks like it's already 2 lots. I'm like, yeah, it is already 2 lots. Go away. Whereas now it's like, now it's like, the only ones left have like flooding or character houses or heritage or a landscape tree or something that's just like stopping it from happening.
Do you see the same deals coming up over and over again, like 123 Smith Street one? And then here's my quick parts reply: 123 Smith Street. Auto reply. Sorry, we know that zoning overlays, blah blah.
And giving away industry secrets, but yeah, a lot. Like so often, like we see things because we do this like site finding list that we have. We see all these properties get listed. And then, so we have already researched them, and then we'll get like 10 inquiries over the weekend about them. And then because I've already written something, I'm just like, hi, insert name. Here's my like full length bit of advice for you about, and they're like, wow, that's so well thought out. Thank you. And it's like, yeah, well, I'm kind of responding to 10 people at the same time. I may as well make it like good. So, but yeah, when those things come up, and sometimes they come up over years, like the same property, like the next person thinks they're going to buy it, and then and we're just like, hey, look, we've had like 10 inquiries about this over the past 4 years, like just giving you the heads up that something is either wrong with it, or the 99% of the time it's like the person just doesn't really want to sell and they're just kind of entertaining it.
What are some of the more physical things we should think about for a site? So one of them is there's multiple sites you can choose. You can have one sloping towards the road. You can have one sloping towards the rear. You can have a massive tree out the front on the verge that is not the site itself. You can have a massive tree on the house, on the site itself. Like, what are some of the things we should be thinking about and saying, you know what, that's actually not as attractive as it first looks?
Yeah, I again go back to that logical approach. Like if you want to buy a development site and you're like, I've done my research in the right zone, it's got the right frontage, and you go there and just have a look at it and imagine the end result. So, and then imagine building the end result. So if you stand there and you're looking at the front of the site and you're like, there's like a tree right where I would want to put my driveway. Like, could that be a problem? Google like street tree verge Brisbane. Like, the number one thing that will come up is like, do not touch the street trees. So then it's like, okay, well, that's now a problem. And then you're like, oh, there's a huge gum tree. What's that? Google it. There might be a problem with the gum, So it's just like taking that logical approach of, if you see something that would potentially inhibit you doing that development, then it's probably going to come up as an issue at some point. So always take that logical approach. Have you need to have a bit of a critical analysis of the whole situation. Don't just be like, oh, it's a beautiful character house, but it's pretty run down. I'll be able to demolish it. Be like, have a bit more thought to it and be like, well, it's a pretty old character house. Like, yeah, I could demolish it, but like, will council let me? Is the frame good? Like, if you just have this logical approach to it
Is it
all,
heritage listed?
yeah, look at your overlays, look at the zone.
Yeah,
and
it sounds like a very systematic, process-driven sort of, and that's what I like about town planning. Usually, if you follow the process, it's a glide path. It's which way do you sort of follow? Before we get into the really spicy topic of the housing sort of affordability and how and your thoughts and issues on that, I wanted to ask. You said that the 2-into-1s are probably, we've missed the boat on that one. Where do you see opportunities in town planning at the moment?
Great.
Yeah, really good question. I think in Queensland and specifically at the moment, the state government, 10 years behind the rest of the country and probably the rest of the world, has started making some amendments to allow you to like rent granny flats, do rooming accommodation without approval. So they've kind of changed all these things. So I think there's a good opportunity right now. Like if you had an investment property in Brisbane, like the renting, like the rental price is crazy. Like you could probably, do a feasibility and build a granny flat and rent that out. So like to me, if I had lots of houses in good locations, which I don't, unfortunately, but if I had a lot of land and a lot of houses, like I'd be putting granny flats on all of them right now, especially going up to the Olympics in Brisbane. Like you'd just be printing money in 10 years' time. So I think that's an opportunity that no one is even aware of yet, I don't think.
Is there like a minimum land size in Brisbane? And of course, it's going to be different council overlays that you think about, or how is it thought about to say, you know what, my site's feasible for a granny flat?
Well, so it's prohibited from council to assess them now. So you can just go ahead and do it. Council's not allowed to mess with you. It's unfortunately very complicated. So I wouldn't just like go for it. Like definitely check with the planner. And if the planner has no idea what you're talking about, like you need to call a different planner because it's a bit of a.
Give him this video.
Yeah. Call me. Don't call me. Email me. But I think just financially more so, like like from a planning point of view, it should be fine. You can build whatever you want, but if you're going to spend $500,000 building a granny flat and you can only rent it for $100, like you probably shouldn't build it.
No, I mean like lot size. Like what you're saying, council cannot say anything about you putting a granny flat on the back. I have a 350 square meter house. 350 square meter lot, and I want to put a tiny little one, studio granny flat that I can kind of make work. Council can't say no to that.
Yeah. So if you're and just doing a selfless plug here, but if you add me on LinkedIn, I'm very vocal about all of these changes because no one seems to understand the impact that they have. So the state government basically I think it was September last year, and then they did more amendments in December, kind of just overnight just went, you can rent your granny flat now. And then it's like, Oh, okay, how does that work? And then everyone just scrambled to figure out how that works. And it doesn't work in some places. But so then their solution to that was later in December, they went, okay, well, because we kind of ballsed up the first part of it, you know what? Council's just not allowed to assess this at all anymore. So you're not allowed to assess houses. But the intricacy of that is council's not allowed to assess MCUs, so material changes of use for dwelling houses. So that means they can't assess you building a house unless you're in like a flood overlay or something like that. But that doesn't count. That doesn't include doing an extension to your house, because an extension is not a material change of use. It's building works because you're doing an extension, not changing the use because it's already a house. So the issue there is that if you build a house in a granny flat from scratch, council are not allowed to look at it at all. Doesn't matter what you build, council are not allowed to say anything. You could have a 200 square meter granny flat and a 300 square meter house, and you could rent the granny flat to as many people as you want, and council's not allowed to say anything. Obviously, this is if you're not in a relevant overlay, and there's a couple of caveats to that. You still need a building approval, so you'll still need your normal building approvals. You have to convince a certifier that it's a granny flat, not another house, blah, blah, blah. But if you already have a house and you want to do an extension to it,
you have to get approved.
you have to get an approval because it's not a material change of use, it's building works. So then you get thrown into the planning scheme requirements, which means like the maximum is 80 square meters. And so it's like this really weird space that we're in right now. And I just posed some questions to a magazine up here because they asked for some questions that some spicy questions that we should be asking about these amendments. And one was like, should the state government be stepping in and calling out these local councils that are putting up barriers to allow people to rent their granny flats, which they are. So yeah, it's
What about Moreton Bay? So this is across all of the Queensland state.
Yeah, it's statewide policy. So the only areas that you can't rent a granny flat right now because of issues with the local planning schemes is Brisbane and Somerset in Queensland. Sorry, this is in Southeast Queensland. I did like a analysis of a bunch of councils with different style planning schemes, and it seemed to be in Brisbane and Somerset Regional Council that you can't rent granny flats without a permit. That said, at an industry forum in Brisbane, they said that if you lodge an application, they'll approve it. But they shouldn't be approving it because it conflicts directly with their scheme. So I don't know.
So I feel like this is a revelation of sorts. Like this is fundamental shift in. This is what solves the housing crisis. Like if everyone just starts popping up granny flats, but I don't even.
Well, I feel a little uncomfortable saying to getting people to suggest that, but yeah.
Well, the other opportunity I think that there is right now, again, that's come up because of that amendment, is the state government also allows you to do a 5-bedroom rooming accommodation anywhere in Queensland, meeting those same rules. So you can build a rooming accommodation. So rooming accommodation in Queensland was really a Brisbane thing. Like you can't really do them outside of Brisbane until now. So now you can do a rooming accommodation up to 5 bedrooms and meeting all those provisions without a permit. So, Logan, Moreton Bay, Sunshine Coast, Gold Coast, anywhere you can now do a 5-bedroom rooming house.
Wow. There you go.
That's crazy.
I just wanted to make Alex feel a little better as well, given some of the pre-chat. So somebody said best looking town planning cyclist in Oz, crypto bikes. Somebody who's a fan of the crypto NFC.
Hey, nice.
That's Dim as well. You might know Dim. I don't know.
Dim. Yep, he's the fastest cyclist in Brisbane, I think.
Is he?
I'd like to go for a bike ride with him, but he's too fast, so it'll never happen.
Well, you guys need to chat offline or something. Yeah. Make it happen.
Yeah.
Brian, before we get on to the housing accommodation crisis, Brian's asked can a granny flat be rooming? I don't think so, but can it?
No. So
the nature of a granny flat, like how would you split up? Like, I don't know, maybe you have a 2-bedroom granny flat?
Yeah, well, you got to think about it. So granny flat is part of a house, and then rooming accommodation is its own individual defined land use. So like that question, if you broke it down in a planning sense, would be, can I have a dwelling house and also a rooming accommodation on the same property? And then it's like, well, you can't have 2 different land uses. That would be a dual occupancy, but then a dual occupancy is 2 dwelling houses. So no. So yeah, you'd kind of like conflict heavily with different levels of the planning scheme, unfortunately.
So I'm just going back to this granny flat thing because it's very interesting to me. What is the opportunity? What land type or property is going to lend itself? What property should I be looking at when thinking about this strategy? It's probably the best question.
Yeah, I think any site that wouldn't otherwise have development potential, I would say. So, 400 square meter sites in low density zones is a good one because you look at that and you go, well, that's just a house. It'll only ever be a house. Oh, then it's like, well, if you, with your planning knowledge, now know you can build a granny flat there, it's like, well, it's not just a house. It's a house and it's a dual income site. So you might now be able to pay a little bit more for it. Buy the site above, compete where you couldn't before, and then still, get some money out of it at the tail end of it.
And this might not be around forever. Like this is an opportunity that's around from today until whenever the state government decides to pull the pin.
Well, it's good you said that, because I completely neglected to say that they have said that this will be around. You can do this for the next 3 years. So
Very nice.
so that means you can establish them within the next 3 years. If you establish it in the next 3 years, you're good to go forever. But they reckon in 3 years' time they're going to be like, all right, no more renting granny flats from now on. But there's no way, like, it's political suicide. Like, who's going to make the call to say that that's going to happen? Like, it's not going to happen.
Yeah,
so.
We decided to put all these dwellings here, allow them, and then rip everyone out of their home.
well, that you're still allowed to continue to operate, like you can, because you lawfully established the land use at the time that kind of has like the grandfather kind of provision to it. But so if you've established it, they're not kicking you out. But yeah, would you want to be the politician being like, oh, we've had this affordability crisis over the past 5 years. You know what? We're going to stop you you can't rent granny flats anymore. And then, everyone will go, oh, wow. So this really great thing happened and now you're stopping it. Like, I can imagine.
Well, there was the whole
there
land tax situation going on. I mean, that sort of got kicked to the curve relatively quickly. But yeah, I think a couple of people have asked about where you can read more about this. So what's a good? Is it council sites? Is it government sites? Like
To be honest, and like I'm trying not to like big myself up here, but like the best place you can read about this is on my LinkedIn profile. So I write articles about this kind of stuff, because if you Google it, you're either going to find like a copy of the amended planning regulation, which means nothing to anyone, or you're going to find like you'll probably find like some lawyer might have written something about it, which again might not be written in the way that anyone can understand. So, I pride myself in being able to take this complicated information and strip it back to see how it plays out in reality. So I can see that someone's asked about.
You only just let about 30,000 people know in a group. So yeah, a few more people might know about it now. Apparently, probably.
Yeah, well, that's the value of what you guys bring to the table. Like, it's half these people probably didn't know that this existed until you decided
99%
hunt me down and put me on your on your channel. So yeah, great work.
Okay, we are going to go to our little ad break. That is going to be a 60-second ad break for anyone that wants to rush off and do anything quickly. To 60 seconds. But we are going to talk about, because one thing that I think is striking the nation all throughout Australia is vacancy rates are incredibly low, and that's because we have a housing crisis right now. So I wanted to chat with you and learn a little bit about this housing crisis and how town planning comes to affect that and what all of that stuff looks like. So let's chat about that when I find the right button to press here.
The amazing thing with commercial property investing is that in most cases, it's cash flow positive from day one, which means that you can drive those profits towards paying down the debt. There are instances with commercial property investing where you can actually have the property pay itself off over 10 years, which is absolutely crazy. With commercial property, you get massive net yield, so you can expect anywhere between 6 to 10%. And as we've seen in the current boom, these properties not only provide large cash flow, they do certainly grow wildly in value too. Now, with big rewards comes some risk, and this is why you should de-risk your investment as much as possible. And the way you do that is with expert due diligence. And this is why we highly recommend people hire professionals to help you along in your investing journey. Steve Polisi of Polisi Property is one such expert. Being a chartered mechanical and structural engineer in a past life, Steve draws on his analytical and mathematical skills to do that expert due diligence for you. With 6 years experience in the space, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He's the guy you want in your corner, crunching the numbers and finding the best properties in the best locations, along with ensuring that you avoid the mistakes. Steve has actually even written the book on commercial property investing in Australia. And not only is it a bestseller, I believe it to be the most comprehensive in commercial property investing on the market today. He's been generous enough to give us a massive discount for our audience of 50%. So use the code OZPROP, click the link below, get a copy today, and start learning and getting on your commercial property investing journey.
Here we go. Joe's back. He made it. Oh, everybody's back. So yeah, that was I feel like I'm learning heaps. It's really good, really great to have had you on. But where are we going next show?
And this is the interesting thing, I think. We see headlines all the time, and I'm a prime example of this. I saw the headline about the government in Queensland, state government taking over, letting people rent out their granny flats. And what does that actually mean on the ground level, and where is the opportunity? And that kind of is filtered through to you, Alex, and you just not blatantly see, like everyone else is blinded. You can blatantly see there's an amazing opportunity here, because like if you build a granny flat, it's going to cost you $210,000, and you're going to rent it for about, depending on the, where the hell it is, $350,000, $400,000. Like that's going to be a massive yield, which will improve the yield that you buy on that house. So you can spend more for that front house, spend the $200,000. The only challenge is with granny flats, actually, just to mention this before we start saying how great granny flats are. If you're looking to buy a house for $500,000 and then spend $200,000 on a granny flat, the house will most likely, some situations it will, not revalue back up at $700,000. So you won't be able to renovate the front house, do all these magic things, put a granny flat on the back, and expect to get a dollar for dollar return. So that's just one situation. Anyway, sorry, but that's one thing that's very interesting to me. But what I'm interested more so is this housing crisis that we're currently in. So can you speak to the current housing affordability, housing crisis issue, and how town planning comes into this, and how politics, because I feel like it's a melting pot of all three.
What about TikTok?
Yeah.
How does TikTok come into it as well?
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously I can't speak on I haven't written the gospel on the housing affordability crisis or anything, and everything that we do is in Queensland, so I'm not fully aware of what's going on outside of Queensland.
There's a housing crisis going on all over. But yeah,
did you see that news.com story about that place? I think it was in not Zetland. It was one of the inner east of Sydney, where there's like 150 people line up for an apartment. Did you guys see that story?
Yeah, I did. That's just craziness.
Wasn't a nice apartment either.
I feel really really happy that I'm a bit older, not that much older, but I have afforded to buy a place when I did, because I would hate to be stuck in that rental affordability crisis, because it's so real, and just no one really cares, because the majority of the voters are not affected by it, and that's the really depressing thing for younger people stuck in that rut, because the key decision makers are completely influenced by the people who don't give a crap, unfortunately. I watched a seminar a while ago just about it was more about property in general and what's going on and blah blah blah, to do with negative gearing, and it basically said it would be absolute political suicide for any politician to say anything about scrapping any of that, because 70% of voters are the ones who are benefited by it. And I think it was actually more. It was 88% of voters are benefited by the affordable, the rental crisis. So when you put that in perspective, are we ever going to see a solution that actually benefits the people who are being affected by it? Right now, probably not, unfortunately. And it's because it's just politics. Why would a politician go out on a ledge and be we need to change this, full well knowing that the people that he's going to be pitching that to are the ones who are going to be negatively affected by it. It's not a good idea for them. So I could imagine their little community of advisors being oh, you want to open up some land and do some infill development? That's a bad idea, because the majority of people who live in the city are rich people who are our voters. So do not do that, because we're going to lose the election. Then you're not going to be able to do anything. So you know what? Just stay silent on that. Talk about something over here. People love koalas. Protect the koalas. So like this is like
Can I ask the question? There was and I don't try and get too sort of I try and play the policy, not the party, but that policy where they had, I think it's 1 million houses, where that was it in the next 4 years. So it was Labor's policy. Is that I don't know the exact policy, but is that roughly what they're proposing? It's something like that. What are your thoughts? That's not really necessarily going to solve it, though, is it? Because what are your thoughts on that? Anyway?
Yeah, so obviously everything that I do it has some level of politics involved. Like politics and planning should be very separate from each other. And if you talk to anyone about it, in theory, they are. Like you lodge an application, there's no way that the politician got involved with the decision making of that application. But like for sure they did, because it affects their contingency of people and that they represent. So, there's obviously this interaction. But, the problem that plays out when you have councils or the state government or any kind of politician being like, we have this target to meet this number of houses, they go, where are we going to put these houses? Oh, well, infill development makes sense. So in Queensland, I operate in Queensland, so I'm going to keep using it as an example. So in Queensland, we have the Southeast Queensland Regional Plan. The outcome of that regional plan said specifically, I think I'm going to forget the number, but it's like 70% of new development needs to be infill. So infill development is like subdivisions, like in the city, townhouse developments, duplexes, granny flats. Like that's where 70% of the population over the next 20 years needs to be in infill development. But infill development doesn't win votes because that affects people, and that's where you get the NIMBYs of the world.
Yeah.
So the state government's like, you have to have infill development. And then the local councils go, well, I'm not going to get voted in if I let infill development happen. So where can we put, 1 million more people? You know what? Let's chuck them out west. No one cares about what's going on out there. Our voters are in here. So if we just chuck them out there where no one can see, and we don't care what it looks like, and developers aren't going to develop it unless they can make money. So let's chop it up as finely as we can, narrow streets. Like it's the only way a property developer can make money out of it. And that's what ends up happening. So it's like this, like the politicians are really not acting on the best interests of the people at all. They're just acting on the best interests of the people right now, which
it's kind of short-termism, isn't it? Like rather than thinking, well, what is this going to look like in 10, 15, 20, 50 years time? It's how I win the next election.
Yeah, and the really sad thing about that is, and this is why I like do so much public speaking, and I have a TikTok account, and I'm very vocal on LinkedIn, is because they're kind of playing off people's lack of knowledge about planning and what's going to happen over the next 10 years. Because you'll be hard to find someone who's, maybe like between like 45 and like 45 onwards, who you like, hey, you just bought this beautiful house in Camp Hill. Do you love it? You love the neighborhood. Hey, look, there's a development going to happen down the street. Like immediately they're going to be like, oh, I hate it. I don't want it to happen. But then it's like, okay, well, if you don't let that happen, your kids are not going to be able, like they're going to have to live in Park Ridge. Like there's no way they're going to afford here. And you'll be hard to find someone who will actually be like, oh, hang on, I actually understand the full consequence of me being a NIMBY, and because I understand how the planning scheme works and how strategic planning happens and why councils zone things particular ways to kind of benefit the community as a whole. So like if people understand that, then I think we'll then start seeing change and seeing politicians going like, hey, that guy's anti-infill development. You know what? That's actually bad. Like, that's bad that that person's in negative infill development. Like, are they going to protect your Brisbane backyard? That's a bad thing. You don't want a backyard, because if you want a backyard, you need to move out to Park Ridge, because in the city, we're trying to like create affordable housing. We're trying to get people close to infrastructure and services and public transport. And that's where the solution will be, so I could rant for like hours about this, but like, that little intricacy between planning and politics is really important that everyone understands, and everyone, in my opinion, needs to have everyone should have a basic level understanding of town planning and what it means and how it affects them. And if everyone does that, then I think like we'll start seeing a shift in the politics, which means we'll start seeing a shift in where development happens, which will open up more affordable housing options closer to the areas that they should be. So that's why in my 5-minute rant, I started a TikTok account. So I thought, how can I reach the kids? How can I reach the masses? How can I have, more reach than council themselves or the politicians themselves? And that is using platforms and social media to be like, well, if the Lord Mayor of Brisbane has a reach of 1 million people because he has all these social media accounts and he has the media agencies attached to him. Well, if I can have 1 million people following me and and that gains interest from people like yourselves and media agencies, and it's like, well, if I can have equal amount of influence on the market as the politician does, then maybe I can do something to kind of help benefit the whole population. So that's kind of what I'm trying to do.
The young people still have a vote as well, right? Like if they're more informed, because I mean, a 45-year-old is going to be far more interested in the town planning scheme that the local mayor has put together, because he's advanced, he's moved on, like he cares about that stuff. Whereas an 18-year-old's more interested in hanging out with friends and doing cool stuff. So yeah, if you can reach them, they still have that vote, and then they can start to unwind some of these crazy, silly ideas. But an example to kind of fix this housing crisis is what the state government's brought in with the granny flats. Like, is that a move to help with the housing affordability, or is it a
loophole?
How does that kind of play into it?
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they dropped it overnight after a housing summit that just had, basically media agencies attending it, like it was a knee-jerk reaction to some negative attention, like that's all it was. Like, did they think it through? Like, no, not at all. Like the main area that you would want to be able to rent a granny flat in, you can't. Like, so then 2 months later, they then were like, oh crap, we've like created a problem here and it didn't actually work. And there's people like me blowing them up on TikTok, and I was on ABC News and I was doing all these things and being like, you know what, like you actually haven't done anything. Not that I was the reason why this happened, but like I think they realized that, well, we actually didn't do anything with this first amendment, so we're going to make another amendment, and then like that will be another good look for us. But then they just added like a whole nother layer of complexity and nightmare to like the crazy complex planning scheme like that there already is. So like they're trying to do good things, but whether or not they're trying to do good things to like genuinely benefit people, like I don't know. Like I honestly don't know. I think like and like if they were, why didn't they do this like 3 years ago when like everyone knew this was going to happen? Like they didn't, because no one cared. Now all of a sudden people care. So now the politicians are like, boom, don't worry, we're going to save the day. It's like, no, you created this problem by not allowing this development to happen. Now you're pretending as if you're the savior for the problem, but really you've just like Band-Aid solutioned it and haven't solved anything. So like, I'm not saying that I have the solution. I'm just saying that like, don't give the credit to the people who are just trying to like, show you pretty pictures.
Well, they're
probably
creating
going
a problem.
I'm going to get in trouble, aren't I?
Yeah.
What were you saying, Jeff?
I was going to say they're creating, but also solving the problem. So I think if the person
I'm going to light this fire over here, and then I'm going to put my fireman uniform on and go put that out.
Yeah, 100%. So
I want to throw this question for Brian, because I love Brian's. What is the philosophy of more people and less space versus growing new cities like China has done? Build it and they will come. Surely we have enough spare land. Hong Kong, well, they don't have the space. Hand grenade, I know. I don't know, is that a hand grenade? Oh, no, it's not. I don't think it's really that much of a hand grenade.
Yeah, you read that incredibly well there, Jeff. Did you get that? Do you know what he's saying?
Yeah. So basically, So I imagine there isn't a lot of space in Hong Kong, whereas China is a huge space, and they just build those cities, but people don't really live in them anyway. So Interesting, yeah. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, I suppose the problem with creating satellite cities and they do this stuff all the time. Like, it's not an uncommon thing. It's just the sheer amount of money and cost of infrastructure and services. Like, we just don't have the population density to support that kind of development. Like, if you were like, let's go build, so if they open up, like, I don't know, 500 kilometers north of west of Brisbane, they're just like, you know what, we're going to put a satellite city there. Like, where are they going to get their water from? Okay, now they need to build a dam. Does it rain enough out there? Probably not. They're going to have to build a pipeline into the back of Toowoomba somewhere, into the ranges. That's going to, and then, like, you start stacking these things up, and then it just doesn't make
What about
sense.
the jobs? Like, what sort of employment is out that way as well? I mean, maybe mining.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is there mining out that far?
Yeah, even then, that's like a temporary employment. Like, so yeah, you're right. Then there's no job. So, like, it doesn't really make sense. And that's probably why you have these, I don't know a lot of them, but I see the headlines of like whole cities in China that are empty, that the ghost towns. And it's because in theory and in planning, it doesn't really make sense. Like, you want people, unfortunately, still want to be close to the CBD because they think that that's where they have to be to work and live. But yeah, I'm if the money was there, you could do it, and like they do it in some places and it works. What's that? Don't they have, what's that country that they've proposed? Is it Saudi Arabia, where they're having like the really long city? Like, is that, where's that? Have you guys seen this?
No, that's a town planning nerd.
Yeah,
I'm
it is.
gonna Google long city. Where
Yeah,
is long
so
city?
I think it's in Saudi Arabia. Someone's going to be in the comments like, it's not in Saudi Arabia, you are like asshole. But yeah, they've like proposed
Saudi
this,
Arabia,
like,
105 miles, so probably about, what's that, 160 kilometer. Let's see, it's at the line. It's called the line. Apparently, the line will cover an area of 13 square miles. HRH, Her Royal Highness Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS, has revealed designs for the linear city of the future is expected to decrease the country's dependence on oil reserves. There you go.
So I love it. So if anyone's listening or watching, definitely like Google the line. It's a great idea, but like, it's like in the middle of nowhere. So I've hypothesized with lots of planning colleagues, like, it's surely just a marketing stunt. Like, there's like,
In
are
the
people
desert.
really gonna
How does it
are people
work?
really gonna like move to Saudi Arabia and live in this like bubble or line?
But what if the pub is on one end and you want
Mate,
like
I don't know too much about the pubs in Saudi Arabia, Joe.
Coles? Yeah.
Well, apparently the way that they've designed it, and we might be getting really deep here, but I'm pretty sure the way they've designed it is like each part of the line is its own town. So like, everything in your little section is like, it's really future. Like, if you're like Futura, like if you're looking, read
go to
some books
Mars.
from like the 50s, you'll be like, this is literally from one of those books. So it's like this line and this glass area,
George Orwell.
and you're like, yeah, and you're like, the farm's over there and the pub's up there and like hairdressers over there. Like, it's some crazy stuff. But yeah, whether or not that's like a realistic thing that will ever happen, like, where are the jobs? Where does the water come from? Where does the poop go? I don't know.
One of the next topics we're going to talk about is choosing a profitable development site. Now, we're kind of running out of time here, but do you guys think it's worthwhile having a bit of a chat to choosing a profitable development site?
Who's keen to see profitable development site? I mean, I want to see it, definitely. I mean, apparently the two into ones is 1 to 2s is no longer profitable anymore. I need to those ones. So yeah, we need to figure out how to do that. So I think we should look at it, Joe. Why not?
Okay. Let's look into it. What I'm interested in is kind of Jeff's great question, which uncovered that granny flat opportunity. What are some of the development opportunities that you're starting to see out there? 10 years ago, we were talking about the 1 into 2 splitter blocks where it was already subdivided. Perfect opportunity. You just put your new house there, boom, making money. That was 10 years ago. But Alex, you got your finger on the pulse. Where is the opportunities today?
Yeah, good question. Other than the amendments, the granny flats, the rooming accommodation, I think just, so what we're kind of seeing, so in our business, we do development coordination or development management. So we kind of see these developments from like pre-purchase, purchase, town planning, right through construction, all the costs associated with that construction, right through to titling. So we kind of like uniquely as a planning firm have this really broad knowledge of like the costs involved with these projects. And I honestly, and I'm probably like just losing work here, like I cannot see a profitable one at like small lot subdivision anymore unless you buy something at an unbelievably good price. Like the cost of splitting I speak about this regularly. Like 5 years ago, the cost of doing a 1 to 2 lot subdivision was maybe 90 to 120 grand. Like that's probably where it was at, like for everything. So like so you've got your title, you know, right through to having 2 titles, 120 grand. Now, I would be really cautious to tell anyone it would be under 200 grand. So I would be saying like 150 to 220. And that's not including like tax, agents' fees, buyers' agents' fees. Like that's not including any of that. That's just like the hard costs associated with getting approved. So where I see a lot of opportunity at the moment is doing those like 3 or 5 lot subdivisions, a bit more like a bit further out of the city where, you know, people can't be bothered and they think, well, like, oh, I'm not a property developer, I couldn't do 5 lots. It's like, well, you know what? There's not really much difference between a 1, 2 lot subdivision and a 5 lot. And that's, I think, where we're seeing a lot of like potential, where previously people would be like, why would I do 5 lots and take on that amount of risk? I can just do 2 lots and make the same amount of money. So I think those kind of medium scale developments are kind of an opportunity at the moment. The other one is duplexes. A lot of councils are like opening up the opportunity to do duplexes and really like pushing them. So the example that I'll use is in Brisbane, in an LMR zone, like a low medium density residential zone, the minimum lot size for a duplex is 600 square meters with a 15 meter frontage. But we've had them approved on 350 square meter lots with 10 meter frontages. So how do you
get those ones approved?
What are you talking about, Jeff? Good town planning.
Do I need to pay you to get that?
Yeah. So, you know, just reasonable and logical arguments to the planning team. So, but the thing is, if you lodge that application 5 years ago, they'd be like, Alex, you're dreaming. There's no way you need 600 square meters. But now they're like, you know what? Like, we'll approve it. That works. So I think there's a bit of an opportunity there because there's all these people buying sites and they're completely ignoring those 400 square meter lots with a 10 meter frontage because you can't do anything with those. But now council's starting to approve duplexes on them. So you could turn that into 2 titles, sell 2 titles. So that's I think a pretty good opportunity that no one's really jumping on. And yeah, the other ones are kind of more very specific to council regions, but you know,
Is a key way to find those where you're looking at the 400 square meter, 10 meter frontage? Is one of the key things precedence to find where it's been approved elsewhere, or what are some of the characteristics that will likely sort of say, yep, looks good to go in that area?
Yes, obviously it needs to be appropriately zoned, so you got to be in the LMR zone. No overlays that'll affect it, so no character, no flooding, no biodiversity, etc. Sloping towards the street. There's enough room in the frontage for a driveway, so there's no trees or bus stops or electrical. NBN pits, watch out for those NBN pits. They're like 20, 30 grand to move, so you don't want to be going near an NBN pit. So like if all of those things stack up, then you're good to go. Like there's heaps of them. Just go on the, you know, and this is in Brisbane, I should say. So like if you go onto the council website, go through their development eye, search for duplex approvals, you know, you'll find tens of, not hundreds, but, at least 10 or 20 of them that have been approved in the past year like that. And I don't know if any that got refused. So
should be looking at these, show.
Wow. Huh?
We should be looking at these.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone should be looking at them. Like, this is where the opportunity is. It's constantly moving. And then what will happen is there'll be a big supply, and then they'll create rules around that block this opportunity. And then people like Alex will get more creative and figure out what the next opportunity is and then create the next opportunity.
And it really like comes back to that whole like, you know, if you upskill yourself in the field of town planning, like these are the things that you will find that other people won't. And it just gives you that competitive edge over, like if you're standing at an auction with 30 people, like 2 people at that auction probably are familiar with the planning scheme and the potential of that, like the actual potential of that site. So, you know, you're right up there with the people who are like best suited to make the most appropriate offer. And at the same time, like that gives you the ability to make the best offer to get the site above anyone else. But it also gives you the ability to walk away, because you might be like, I know that the infrastructure charge is going to be this. I got to put a stormwater pipe through the neighbor. That could cost me this. I'm gonna have to fight council for this. You know what? I can probably only pay X amount. And the guy standing next to you or the woman standing next to you might not know all of that. So they might just be like, oh, this is great. I can do 5 townhouses. I'm going to pay this much. Yeah. And then you go, well, that's not realistic. I'm going to walk away. So yeah, town planning is a very important aspect of any property investment, whether it's to be a developer or just to hold.
Great. Unreal. There's actually a really good question that came up here.
Tammy.
And yeah, from Tammy. So the question is, so when would the everyday mum and dad investor hire a town planner? I've rang the town council planner many times in the past, but when would we hire or contact a private town planner like yourself instead? So maybe that would be good to talk to the difference between a town planner in council and a town planner like yourself. But yeah, that'd be great to understand that.
Yeah. So speaking from experience in Queensland, I would never call a council town planner. So the people, so like the call center at council, like no one wants to do that job. Like that's the nightmare job. So who do they get to do it? The undergraduates and the graduate planners. So the people with the least amount of experience, just, you know, firing from the hip, having, you know, real confident out of uni, just thinking that they know everything.
Yeah, sounds good. You can do that.
Yeah. Oh, you want to do that? And to the opposite too. We had an inquiry the other day for someone who wanted to build a warehouse, a self-storage facility. And he spoke to the person at council and they're like, oh, you can't do that in this area. It's a industrial area and self-storage is commercial. And then they're like, I just wanted to double check. So I thought I'd call you. And I was like, self-storage is an industrial land use. It's a warehouse. So you actually don't even need approval. And council told you that you're not even allowed to do it. It's the opposite. You can do it without even telling them. So it's always, so I would always just like avoid council, build a relationship with a local planner that is familiar with the area that you work in. So, and why I say that is like, so we work in Brisbane. We do a lot of work in Brisbane. We don't do work on the Gold Coast anymore because it's just a nightmare. And it's just this whole different world in the Gold Coast. It's like 100 kilometers away. Oh, it's 80 kilometers away from us, but it's like completely different world. So
might as well be living on another planet from the sounds of it, mate. Have you ever been to Surface Paradise though?
Oh, mate, beautiful. It's a surface paradise. But so you want to find someone who's like familiar with the area and the question that you have. So I would always be just building a relationship with the local planner from the get-go. Ask them, depending on how busy they are, take them out for a coffee, become friends with them, offer to pay them. We're not paid very often for helping people. So leave them a review on Google, like do anything you can to make you like best friends with this planner, because they're the one that, on Saturday morning, if you're about to make an offer and you're like, damn it, I really need to just run this past my planner. Like you want to have the person who will like take the call. And that will only happen if you develop a relationship. So
I love it.
Yeah.
Dean just wrote a big rant about council town planners. Can I ask a question about town planners versus council? Like because I was told if you're going to ring the council, you would ring and ask to speak to the duty planner. Does that hold any credence, or is that just an urban legend or urban myth?
Well, the duty planner is just the person who takes the call. So like, yeah. So like, you're going to get through to them anyway. If you ask to speak to a town planner, you'll end up with a duty planner. And they're called different things. Like in Brisbane, they're called PIOs, planning information officers. In Logan, I think they're called duty plan. Yeah. So like who you want to talk to, like if you want to and I wouldn't recommend you do this because you'll just get shut down. But if you really want to like get onto the right person, you need to ask to speak to the delegate. So the delegate is the person who's been delegated authority by the council to make decisions on behalf of council. So if you speak to them, they're usually the most experienced. Whether they're the smartest, I don't know, but they're the ones who can like give you advice that will probably hold some weight.
Don't tell them that Alex told you to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you won't get through, but you can try. But yeah, I just wouldn't.
This is kind of what Dean was talking about. He's like, look, council isn't there to answer those type of questions. What kind of development can I do on the site? They're there to give you guidance on whether a specific proposal you have in mind is actually possible. So it's interesting where they're both town planners. You're a town planner. Council is a town planner, but they're two completely different worlds. One is meant to give you, their job is to actually give you the advice and tell you what is possible. And the other one is to fend off all these calls, I guess, by the sounds of things.
Yeah. Well, the council, the state, or whoever you're calling, like if they work for an authority, like they're a regulatory body, really. Like they enforce the rules. They don't most of them don't make the rules. They just enforce them and they interpret them. We interpret them, we bend the rules, we make them work, we apply them in reality. So yeah, there is this like weird us versus them mentality with the planning world, where like, you know, private planners hate council planners hate us, and we're just battling each other and fighting it out all day, every day. And, you know, sometimes that totally is the case. And like, I certainly have people at councils where I'm like, you know, if I see their name, I'm like, here we go. Like, this is just going to be back and forth for days. But realistically, it should be this like harmonious relationship, because I'm trying to get the best for our client. But I have a duty of care as a planner to not, you know, do something absolutely ludicrous that affects the livelihoods of the entire neighborhood. So I'm trying to get the best for our client, which works the best for the community. Council's trying to get the best for the community, really, is what their job, and make that align with the planning scheme. So like together, you know, realistically, we should be like cutting deals. I should be like the conversation should be, look, mate, this is 6 stories high. We think it's sweet to be 6 stories. What do you reckon? And they go, look, 5 stories, you got a deal. And we should be like, you know what? 50% of it's going to be 5 stories. The other 50% will be 6 stories, but we'll chuck in an extra car park. And then they should be like, yep, done deal. Let's go. like that's how it should happen, I reckon. And we should be in like, yeah, we should be in front of a television. Like it needs to be like Judge Judy style. Someone in the middle, like.
On that sort of talking about when to engage and when to chat to a certifier or a town planner, a private town planner. What are some of the key considerations when somebody, what makes a good town planner? Is it experience? Is it, what are those couple of things that people should be asking to make sure the person they're talking to knows what they're talking about?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It depends like what you're trying to do and where you're coming from. So I'm helping a friend of mine right now who lodged her own application. And I helped her, and I was just kind of just giving her a bit of guidance. And so what's been going on for her is the person at council has just been really dropping the ball, but in a way that benefits her. That like if it was me as the applicant, like if I was doing it, she wouldn't be dropping the ball. So in that instance, like the best case scenario is you have no idea what you're doing and just let council make the mistakes. So like sometimes a good planner that you want to be dealing with is someone who has absolutely no idea what they're doing. Which is like the bizarrest juxtaposition to what you would think. But realistically, you want someone who is familiar with the area that you're inquiring about. And a good planner is someone that can just speak off the top of their head. And not to say that like we can investigate anything and become experts in anything, much like, you know, everyone. Like you want to be an expert in artificial intelligence, you know, watch a couple of YouTube documentaries, listen to a podcast. By the end of the week, you could speak about it for days. But it's about finding someone who you can talk to about the problem and that they're finding solutions for you and reasonable solutions that they can speak to. So if you're like, I want to build a 10-story house, and the person's like, yeah, where? And they're like, and you're like, oh, in this 1-story area. And they're like, yeah, sounds good. It's like, do I really know what they're talking about, that's probably not going to be all good. But if you speak to someone who's like, that's batshit crazy, but you know what? Like, I've looked at that area and there's these couple of reasons as to why, you know, that might be a goer. So, you know, yeah. So, you know, if you're speaking to someone, it sounds like they know what they're talking about, go for it. The other thing is, you need to get along with your planner. Like, if you speak to your planner and you're like polar opposite personalities, it's not going to work. And the reason why it won't work is because like you like form this like marriage, like temporary marriage where you're like talking to each other every day, high stakes, high money, high risk. And like, we say things, you say things. If we're not getting along, we don't trust each other, it's just going to break down. Like, whether or not you are aware of it breaking down, you know, you might not be aware of it, but it will. And that will result in you paying more money and not getting the outcomes that you're after. So you need to get someone that sounds smart and knows what they're talking about and you get along with. In my opinion, the money shouldn't matter unless someone's charging you 20 grand for something that's meant to be $1,000.
Yeah, I totally. That's what I always say with the professionals that you work with, like your mortgage broker, your conveyancer, your accountant, your buyer's agent, your town planner, whoever you're chatting with. It's so crucial to be able to, like, you are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if you can't say to that person, actually, I think we shouldn't do X because of this, but you feel a little bit too meek or scared to say it, then you're going to be paying what you're going to do it. It's going to be a mistake, and it's going to be your money that affects it at the end. So 100%, I think getting along with the person that you deal with and communicating with them is crucial. Yeah. Especially with these amazing quick part cut ups that you can just wow,
that is not possible.
Computer says no.
Yeah.
If anyone has any questions, throw them in the comment box below, because we are getting to the tail end of this. There was a question from Brian
housing, about brewing.
No, will flood overlays change with the recent East Coast regular 1 into 1? Oh, sorry, let me bring it up. Change with the regular 1 into 100-year events. What is the process timeline for changes like this? So a good example of this is Logan. Logan recently had a boatload, pun intended, floods.
Had a flood.
Had a flood. And it could have been you could have bought a property that was not in the flood zone. However, it got swept up. It got flooded. So what does that kind of look like?
Yeah, it's a really tricky thing to talk to. You know, there's flood engineers that spend their entire lives dedicated to this whole thing. But yeah, Brian's kind of right. I mean, the 100-year flood event, so the Q100, now known as the 1% AEP, is kind of like what council expects to be the absolute kind of 1 in 100-year flood event. So the problem is we've had like 4 of these in the past like 30 years. So councils are like constantly like increasing and they're getting more data. So as they get more rainfall data and more flooding data, they're kind of figuring out that actually our flooding model is not actually accurate. So they're doing more and more flooding. So yeah, like the only thing that you can really say is that yeah, it's going to be the flood levels will constantly be going up, in my opinion. And it just makes sense. Like, there's less impervious area, there's climate change, there's more rainfall. So it's only natural that we're going to see more of these events. I think there's a question here about, I'm just seeing
this one.
Yeah, the difference between the terminologies between 1% and 1 100-year terminologies. I mean, all of this is like just the same. They just changed the word. It's like, instead of using flooding, let's say water level, like annual
exceedance probability.
Yeah, let's use 1 in 100 as 1%, which is 1% of 100.
Yeah,
which is 1
exactly
100. But what about the actual function of turning that into the new map overlay? So I'm looking at Logan map, and I'm now putting a buffer on that, you know, that where it is and where it should be. which everyone should be doing. But like, when will I get my new map to know when the new flood is coming through?
Yeah, so Logan did that disastrously. And again, I called them out on this on my LinkedIn, so follow me on LinkedIn. But the it's just a shameless plug. But yeah, Logan did that disastrously because what they did, they got a new model internally. So they mapped the entire catchment. I think it was 2 catchments. And then from that, they figured out that the flooding is actually much higher. So they then went to council straight away, like to a council meeting, and voted on it and adopted the new flood line without having a map attached to it. So it's like, so there's this new model where the flooding's higher, but no one knows what it is, including council. So then between like, I think it's April that happened. April or August that happened. And then, so then the start of this process of like, so if your site wasn't affected by a flood overlay, your site, depending on what kind of development you were doing, there was planning scheme policies that still called up the defined flood level, which is what they adopted. So if you had this development which wasn't in the flood overlay, you still had to comply with this non-existent flood level. So it created this drama. So that was particularly bad. They now have a map for it. I don't know, you might have to jump on the development tool, the PD hub. So they do have a map for the new overlay now, but to predict where it's going to be at any given time is just impossible. And Brisbane, I don't know, 3 to 5 years ago, Brisbane changed their flood model for the Brisbane River catchment, and it just shuffled stuff around from what I saw. Like nothing significantly went down or up; it just moved. So you just cannot predict it. And the terminology they use is just crazy. And the thing that the rise of what we're seeing now, which might be of interest, is councils now want the 0.2% AEP, which is a 1 in 500 year event. So there's provisions within the planning scheme policies, and most of them that talk about like an ultimate flood. So that we're seeing council pull that some more, which is crazy because you'll be doing like, where we want to build this like 3 townhouses in this flood overlay, and it doesn't flood right now, but the corner does. And then council goes, that's cool. Show us what it looks like in a 1 in 500 year flood. And you're like, okay, well,
I'm
1 in 500
years.
Yeah, it's like, well, 1 in 500 years, like, it does flood. Maybe there's like a 0.2% chance every year that will happen. Yeah. But like, is this going to be here in 500 years? So that's actually, sorry, I'm ranting, but like, that's actually why they introduced the change in terminology, because people were going, oh, there's a 1 in 100 year flood event. It happened in 74, so it shouldn't happen until 2074. But then it happened again in 2011, then it happened again in 2021. So they're like, well, actually, this 1 in 100 year event is actually a 3 in 100 year event. So they changed it to the percent, because then it's like, it's actually a percentage chance of that happening every year. So it's like, every year there's a 1% chance that this flood will happen. So if it happens, there was a percent chance that it was going to happen. So it could happen every year. It's just unlucky. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Well, this has been a very wide-ranging conversation, but one that's given me a lot of food for thought as well. Like, all of Queensland state government allows you to now just plop a granny flat. Not all of it, obviously check with a local town planner. But that's unreal.
Can we ask this question? There's one started question. 5-bed rooming accommodation can be made by modifying a current home. I think we said probably yes.
Absolutely. I think. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The only issue we find with and this is not a planning issue, it's a building certification issue, is being able to hit all those like building regulation requirements. So like accessible hallway widths, door widths, equitable bathroom, like all of that kind of stuff. We find people come back to us and go, oh, I couldn't make it work. It's too expensive. So that's the only thing we kind of, the feedback we get from modifying an existing house.
But you can build a brand new 5-bedroom accommodation without even checking with council.
Yeah, crazy.
Absolutely mental. Unreal. Okay, if there's any more questions, throw them in. But Alex, thank you very much. Where do people learn more about you what you're offering, because one thing that we didn't even touch on and talk about is you have a platform called Ploitics, which is just an unreal technology platform that is, what does it do? It just lets you look at a site and say, you know what, you're good to go for a development, or is it that easy?
Yeah.
Or is there...
Yeah. So like back in 2016, I launched a web app called Properties. So it's Propertease, so ease. And what it does, it just tells you the development potential of a property with a click of a button. So there's no need to talk to a town planner. There's no need to do your research. There's no need to know what the zone is, because our app will just tell you. It works in Southeast Queensland. We're about to launch the whole of New South Wales. So if you're interested, definitely check it out. Properties.com.au. All of our clients use it, and the reason we tell them to use it is it doesn't replace like the technical assistance of a planner, but what it does is, if you are on realestate.com looking for a development site, instead of like looking at 10 and researching 10, you can look at 100 and then narrow that down to 10, then spend the time on the 10. So you're kind of filtering all of those sites that don't have potential because they have flooding, or they have sewer in the wrong spot, or they have a state mapped overlay, all this stuff that Properties will tell you. You can just skip all those and just jump straight to the good stuff, narrow that down further, send it to someone like me, and then you got your best foot forward.
Unreal. And where can people learn about you? And because you've got a TikTok, that's kind of actually what we that's kind of what reminded me of you. You've been in this industry for a long time, and you're pumping your TikTok full of useful content about the wonderful world, and your LinkedIn.
Yeah. So follow me on TikTok. I somehow snagged the handle Town Planning, so just go @Town Planning and I will come up. Shows the amount of town planners on TikTok. LinkedIn's a great place. I post everything on LinkedIn, and the comments I get from private comments I get from other people in the industry is thank you for saying that. I wish I could, because they have a boss or they have government contracts or whatever. So there's always anything that happens, I always post it. Within a day, I had a post about the granny flats. Within a day, I had a post about the all the changes to the amendment to the regulation. So add me on LinkedIn, and then if you're ever interested, we do have a whole education business that will upskill you in town planning. So anything you want to know about town planning in Queensland, I have a business called Urban and Regional Planning Education Centre. And that's urpec.com.au, and that is something that we partner with universities. You'll be hard pressed to find a university student that hasn't done our courses. So most of the planners that you deal with in Queensland these days have probably been trained by me. So definitely definitely check those out too, because you can do the same courses. Obviously you need to pay for it, but you can do the same courses and be as knowledgeable as most graduate planners these days.
Unreal. Anything that you wanted to say, Jeff?
No. I think it's it's been great to, and I'd be interested to get somebody on who kind of does this in other states. We should almost do a lap of Australia to understand all the quirks around town planning. But no, I've actually learned quite a bit just around the sort of the granny flat situation, plus just the little quirks in understanding the BCC, the Brisbane sort of City Council sort of town planning that you don't necessarily, you need to understand. Can you post these links here in the comments? Well, it's TikTok. I don't know if TikTok's I think it's an app. So LinkedIn I posted earlier, but just Google Alex Steffan. Was it Steffan? Yeah. And I've got his company there as well. So there's enough content built. Yeah, but heaps of insights, and just I'm excited about who'd have thought town planning. How good is that? Here we go.
Yeah, and I really
handle.
I was going to say, I really appreciate you guys getting me on, because as you just said, like, who would have thought town planning, but it controls everything that we do in our lives. And it's just crazy that people aren't more knowledgeable and even aware that it exists. So I really appreciate you guys, and to, reaching out to me and getting me on here. I've had heaps of fun. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. Great first session for 2023. How good is it? It's great to be alive.
Great to be alive. Okay, boys. Thank you very much for that. let's go buy a property. Let's go speak to our town planner. Let's have a great time. Catch us
See you, everybody.
next week.
Gotcha.